The wedding dress hung in Sarah's closet like a ghost. White lace, delicate beading, size 4. She hadn't been a size 4 in 3 years. The woman who wore that dress on a spring morning in 2019 no longer existed. That woman believed in fairy tales. That woman thought love conquered everything. That woman was a fool. Sarah traced her fingers along her ribcage, counting. 1, 2, 3. The bruises had faded months ago, but her body remembered. Muscle memory, the therapist called it. The way she still flinched when someone moved too quickly. The way her shoulders hunched forward, protecting vital organs that no longer needed protecting. The way she held her breath when footsteps approached from behind. Michael had been charming once. Flowers every Friday. Handwritten notes tucked into her lunch bag. He'd quoted poetry and opened doors and made her mother weep with joy at the rehearsal dinner. Her father had shaken Michael's hand and said, "Take care of my girl." And Michael had smiled that perfect smile and promised he would. The first time he grabbed her arm hard enough to leave fingerprints, he'd cried. Really sobbed. Said his father used to hurt his mother and he'd sworn he'd never become that man. Sarah held him while he shook and promised it would never happen again. She believed him because she wanted to. Because admitting the truth meant admitting she'd made a catastrophic mistake in front of everyone she loved. The second time, he didn't cry. He explained calmly why she'd made him angry. Her tone had been disrespectful. She'd embarrassed him in front of his colleagues. She needed to learn. And somehow, twisted by his logic and her own desperate need to fix things, she apologized. By the time she understood what was happening, she barely recognized herself. The woman in the mirror wore long sleeves in summer. She'd stopped seeing friends because explaining the cancelled plans took too much energy. Her sister's wedding had come and gone, and Sarah had stayed home with a migraine that was actually a split lip. She'd become a shadow, a performance, a careful arrangement of lies. The night she finally left, Michael hadn't hit her. That was almost worse. He'd simply looked at her with those cold blue eyes and said, "No one will ever love you like I do. You're nothing without me." And for the first time in 3 years, Sarah had felt something other than fear. She'd felt rage. She'd packed while he was at work. One suitcase. Her grandmother's ring. The photographs from before. She'd left her wedding dress in the closet because that woman was already dead. She'd driven 18 hours straight, stopping only for gas, not knowing where she was going until she saw the sign, Pine Ridge Reservation, South Dakota. Her college roommate Maya lived there now, working as a teacher. They'd lost touch after Sarah got married, the way friendships dissolve when one person starts making excuses for bruises. But Maya had sent a card every year on Sarah's birthday. The same message, "Whenever you're ready, you have a place here." Sarah had never been to South Dakota. Never been west of Ohio. The landscape rolled out endless and strange, all that sky pressing down like a presence. The reservation was nothing like she'd imagined. Poverty sat visible in sagging roofs and rusted cars, but something else lived here too. Something that made her chest loosen for the first time in years. Maya didn't ask questions when she opened the door and found Sarah standing there with her single suitcase and hollowed-out eyes. She just pulled her inside and said, "Welcome home." That first night, Sarah lay in Maya's spare room and listened to the wind. It sounded different here. Cleaner somehow. She'd spent 3 years holding her breath, and now she inhaled deeply, letting the air fill spaces that had been collapsed and forgotten. She didn't know it yet, but in 3 weeks, she'd meet a man who would teach her what strength actually meant. A Lakota chief who understood that breaking was sometimes the first step toward becoming whole. The community center smelled like fry bread and coffee. Sarah stood in the doorway, trying to calm the panic rising in her throat. Maya had convinced her to come to the weekly gathering, promising it would be low-key. Just neighbors sharing food and stories. But Sarah's body screamed danger at the sight of so many people in one room. Too many variables. Too many ways to mess up. She'd almost turned around when she saw him. He stood near the far wall, talking with a group of elders. Tall, maybe 50, with long black hair threaded with silver that he wore in a single braid down his back. He had the kind of face that looked carved from stone, all strong lines and quiet authority. But it was his hands that caught her attention. He gestured as he spoke, movements deliberate and controlled. Hands that looked like they'd never been raised in anger. "That's Chief Standing Bear," Maya whispered. "Tribal Council. He runs the youth programs and the cultural center. Everyone calls him Joe." Sarah watched him laugh at something one of the elders said. The sound carried across the room, genuine and unguarded. She couldn't remember the last time she'd heard Michael laugh like that. His laughter had always had an edge, a calculation. This man's joy seemed to come from someplace deep and uncomplicated. He's a widower, Maya continued. Lost his wife to cancer 7 years ago. Never remarried. Dedicated himself to the community instead. Joe's eyes swept the room and landed on Sarah. For a moment, they simply looked at each other. His expression didn't change, but something passed between them. Recognition maybe. Not of each other, but of something similar. Damage. Survival. The specific weariness of people who'd carried too much for too long. He excused himself from the elders and walked over. Sarah's instinct screamed to step back, create distance, but she forced herself to stay still. Maya made introductions. Sarah's staying with me for a while, Maya explained. She's from Ohio originally. Joe extended his hand. Welcome to Pine Ridge. His grip was firm but gentle. He released her hand the moment she tensed, so quickly she wondered if she'd imagined it. But his eyes told her she hadn't. He'd noticed. He'd understood. And he'd immediately given her space. Maya's one of our best teachers, he said, shifting the attention away from Sarah. The kids love her. You picked a good friend. She picked me, Sarah said quietly. The first words she'd spoken, and they came out rough, unpracticed. Joe nodded as if she'd said something profound. The best friendships work that way. Someone called Maya's name from across the room. She glanced at Sarah, uncertain. Sarah managed a small smile. I'm okay. Go ahead. Maya squeezed her hand and disappeared into the crowd. Sarah stood there, suddenly aware that she was alone with this man she didn't know. The old panic started to rise. There's coffee in the kitchen, Joe said casually, pointing toward a doorway. Quiet in there if you need a minute. He'd given her an escape route. Not insisted she stay and socialize. Not made her feel weak for needing to retreat. Just offered a simple option with no judgment attached. Thank you, Sarah said, and she meant it for more than just the coffee. Over the next 3 weeks, Sarah saw Joe regularly. He ran morning meditation sessions at the cultural center that Maya attended. Sarah started joining them, sitting in the back, focusing on her breath the way Joe instructed. His voice during those sessions was different. Slower. Each word given space and weight. Breathe in strength, he'd say. Breathe out what doesn't serve you. Sarah breathed out fear. Shame. The voice in her head that sounded like Michael telling her she was worthless. Joe never singled her out, never asked personal questions. But he had a way of teaching that felt directed specifically at her struggles. He talked about how trauma lived in the body. How healing wasn't linear. How strength wasn't about never falling down but about learning to stand back up. After one session, he approached her. You're doing good work, he said simply. Sarah felt tears prick her eyes. No one had told her she was doing good work in so long. Michael had only ever told her what she was doing wrong. I don't feel strong, she admitted. Joe considered this. The Lakota have a saying. Mitakuya o yasin. It means all my relations. We're all connected. Your strength doesn't have to come from inside you alone. It can come from the people around you, the earth beneath your feet, the sky above your head. You're not meant to do this alone. That night, Sarah cried for the first time since leaving Michael. Not the silent tears she'd shed in bathroom stalls and parked cars. Real, ugly sobbing that shook her whole body. Maya held her and didn't try to make it stop. When Sarah finally caught her breath, she felt lighter. Emptier in a good way. Like she'd purged poison from her system. She didn't know it yet, but Joe standing bare was about to teach her the hardest and most necessary lesson of her life. That being broken wasn't the end of her story. It was the beginning. The reservation had rhythms that Sarah's old life had never known. Sunrise ceremonies. Community meals. Long silences that didn't need filling. Joe moved through these rhythms like water, present but never imposing. He'd nod at Sarah when their paths crossed, sometimes say a few words, but he never pushed. Never demanded. It made her want to get closer. Tell me about him, Sarah said to Maya one evening as they washed dishes. Maya smiled. Joe? He's complicated. Simple. Both at once. That's not helpful. He grew up here, left for college, became a lawyer in Denver. Made good money, had the corner office, the whole thing. Then his wife got sick, and they came home. She wanted to die here, surrounded by family. After she passed, he stayed. Said the city had taught him how to make money but this place taught him how to live. Sarah dried a plate slowly, processing. He gave up everything. He'd say he found everything. Maya handed her another dish. He started the youth programs because reservation kids have the highest suicide rates in the country. Started the cultural center because he said our young people were forgetting who they were. He works 18-hour days and never complains. Sounds exhausting. I think it saves him. Gives his grief somewhere to go. Sarah understood that. She'd been trying to outrun her pain, but maybe Joe had the right idea. Transform it into something useful instead. The next morning, Sarah showed up at the cultural center. Joe was teaching a group of teenagers traditional beadwork. His large hands moved with surprising delicacy, threading tiny beads onto sinew. He glanced up when she entered, gestured to an empty seat. We're making medicine bags, he explained. Each pattern tells a story. Sarah Saturday. A girl who looked about 16 pushed beads and thread toward her. What story do you want to tell? Sarah had no idea. Her story felt like nothing but damage and shame. But Joe said, start with one good thing. Just one. She thought of Maya's spare bedroom. The sound of wind at night. Coffee in a quiet kitchen. Safety, she said finally. Joe nodded. That's a good story. For 2 hours, Sarah focused on threading tiny beads. Her hands shook at first, but the repetitive motion calmed her. Joe moved around the table, helping students, his presence steady and unhurried. When he stopped beside Sarah, she tensed. Breathe, he said quietly. I'm just going to show you a technique. I won't touch you. He demonstrated in the air beside her hands, showing how to tighten the thread. Never once did his hands come near hers. The consideration in that gesture made her throat tight. After class, the teenagers filed out, loud and laughing. Sarah started cleaning up, but Joe touched the table near her hand. Not her, just near. Walk with me. They went outside, following a path that led away from the buildings toward open land. The sky stretched enormous overhead, that impossible Dakota blue. Joe didn't speak for a long time. Sarah had learned this was his way. He let silence do its work. Finally, he said, Maya told me a little. Not details. Just that you left a bad situation. Sarah's shoulders hunched. She shouldn't have. She's worried about you. She asked if I'd talk to you. He paused. I told her I would if you wanted. But only if you wanted. Why would I want that? Because I know something about being broken. Sarah stopped walking. Joe stood a few feet away, giving her space, his eyes on the horizon. My wife and I had 15 years together, he said. Good years. But watching her die, not being able to stop it, not being able to fix it, that broke something in me. I was angry. At the cancer. At the doctors. At the Creator for taking her. Mostly at myself for being helpless. That's different, Sarah said. You didn't choose. You didn't choose either. His voice was firm. Whatever happened to you, you didn't choose it. You chose to survive it. That's different. Tears burned in Sarah's eyes. I stayed. For 3 years, I stayed. That was a choice. Leaving was the choice that mattered. I'm so ashamed. Joe turned to face her fully. Shame is a weapon people use to keep you small. Don't carry his weapon for him. Something cracked open in Sarah's chest. All the self-blame, the voice telling her she should have known better, should have left sooner, should have been stronger, it had been Michael's voice all along. She'd internalized his cruelty and made it her own. I don't know how to put myself back together, she whispered. Then don't, Joe said simply. Don't go back to who you were. Become someone new. They stood there as the sun moved lower, painting the sky orange and pink. Joe told her about the Lakota concept of Hakoka, the sacred center. How everyone had one, a place inside where truth lived. Trauma pushed people away from their center, made them forget who they were. The work isn't going back, he explained. It's finding your way to a new center. Building yourself around what you've learned. Sarah thought about this. She'd been trying to become the woman she was before Michael. But maybe that woman's innocence was gone forever. Maybe she needed to become someone wiser, harder, but also kinder to herself. Will you teach me? She asked. Joe smiled. I already am. Healing, Sarah discovered, was nothing like she'd imagined. It wasn't linear. It didn't announce itself with fanfare. Some days she woke up feeling strong, capable, ready to face the world. Other days the weight of what she'd survived crushed her before she got out of bed. Joe taught her that both were okay. Both were part of the process. He took her to a sweat lodge ceremony. Sarah had been terrified at first, enclosed space, extreme heat, strangers. All her triggers in one place. But Joe explained every step beforehand, gave her permission to leave anytime, positioned himself between her and the door so she'd feel safe. Inside the lodge, as steam rose from hot stones and prayers were spoken in Lakota, Sarah felt something shift. The darkness wasn't threatening. The heat wasn't punishment. It was purification. She sweated out 3 years of poison, and when she emerged into cool night air, she felt lighter than she had in memory. The lodge represents the womb, Joe explained as they sat by the fire afterward. You go in carrying what hurts you. You're reborn without it. I still hurt, Sarah admitted. You will for a while. But it's clean hurt now. Healing hurt. Not the infected kind. He understood the difference. That was the gift of Joe standing bare. He'd walked through his own fire and came out knowing the landscape of pain. He never minimized hers, never rushed her, never suggested she should be over it by now. The teaching continued in small moments. Joe showed her how to ride horses across the prairie, how to read weather in the clouds, how to find stillness in movement. He introduced her to elders who shared stories about resilience and survival. The Lakota people had endured genocide, forced removal, cultural erasure. Yet they were still here, still strong, still whole. How? Sarah asked one of the grandmothers. How do you survive something that should destroy you? The old woman smiled, her face a map of wrinkles. We remember who we are. We hold on to our center. And we let the people who love us carry us when we can't walk. Sarah was learning to be carried. Maya cooked her favorite foods and sat with her during nightmares. The teenagers from beadwork class invited her to basketball games and graduation ceremonies. Joe continued his quiet presence, always there but never overwhelming. One afternoon, he took her to a place he called his sanctuary. A rise overlooking the Badlands, where striated rock formations stretched in impossible colors, rust, cream, deep purple. The wind blew constant and clean. I come here when I need to remember I'm small, Joe said. The earth has been here millions of years. My problems are nothing to these rocks. Does that help? Sometimes. Sometimes I need to feel small. Other times I need to remember I matter. He sat down on the warm stone. Balance. Sarah sat beside him, careful to maintain space. Over the months, she'd gotten better at being near him. Her body no longer screamed danger. But she still couldn't imagine being touched. Can I tell you something? Joe asked. Of course. When my wife died, I didn't want to survive it. Stayed in bed for 3 months. Didn't eat unless someone forced me. I wanted to follow her wherever she'd gone. Sarah looked at him, this strong man who seemed unshakable. What changed? My nephew. He was 16, struggling, thinking about ending his life. Someone told me, and I got angry. Furious. How dare he give up when he had his whole life ahead? Then I realized I was doing the same thing. If I wanted him to fight, I had to fight too. Did he make it? He did. He's in college now, studying engineering. Joe picked up a stone, turned it in his fingers. Saving him saved me. That's when I understood that healing isn't selfish. When we heal ourselves, we heal our communities. Your pain doesn't just affect you. Your healing won't either. Sarah absorbed this. She'd been thinking of her recovery as personal, private. But Maya was happier with Sarah here. The teenagers at the cultural center had started confiding in her about their own struggles. She was becoming part of something larger than herself. I got a letter from Michael's lawyer, she said suddenly. He wants me to come back. Says he's in therapy. Says he's changed. Joe's jaw tightened, the first time she'd seen him react with anything like anger. Do you want to go back? No. God, no. But I feel guilty. What if he really has changed? What if he needs? He's a grown man. His healing is his responsibility, not yours. Joe's voice was hard. You don't owe him anything. Not your time, not your energy, not another second of your life. But if I could help. Sarah. Joe turned to face her. Listen to me. You cannot fix him. You cannot save him. You can only save yourself. She heard the weight of experience in his words. Did someone try to make you responsible for their healing? My wife's sister blamed me for not catching the cancer sooner. Said if I'd been more attentive, insisted on more tests, she'd still be alive. I carried that guilt for 2 years before I understood it wasn't mine to carry. How did you let it go? Badly. Slowly. With a lot of help. He set down the stone. I'm still learning. But I know this, We can support each other's healing, but we can't do the work for someone else. Michael has to save himself. You need to save you. The sun was setting, painting the Badlands in shades of fire. Sarah thought about the woman who'd arrived here months ago, hollow and afraid. She was still afraid sometimes. Still hollow in places. But she was also stronger. Clearer. More herself than she'd been in years. Thank you, she said. For what? For seeing me. Really seeing me. Not the broken parts. Not the victim. Just me. Joe smiled, and it transformed his face. That's easy. You're worth seeing. Spring arrived on the reservation with sudden violence. Winter broke like a fever, and within days, the brown prairie exploded green. Sarah had been at Pine Ridge for 6 months. Half a year of healing, learning, slowly piecing herself into a new shape. She barely recognized the woman she'd become. She'd started teaching art classes at the cultural center. Painting, drawing, sculpture. She'd been an artist before Michael, and rediscovering that part of herself felt like finding a lost limb. The teenagers created fierce, honest work, and Sarah encouraged every wild impulse, every dark exploration. Art could hold what words couldn't. Joe attended the first exhibition of student work. He stood in front of a painting by a girl named Kimimila, a brutal abstract piece about sexual assault. He didn't look away from the pain in it. He honored it with his attention. This is important work, he told Kimimila. Thank you for your courage. The girl, usually so quiet, stood taller. Sarah understood. Joe had that gift. He made people feel seen in their entirety, darkness and all. After the exhibition, Joe asked Sarah to walk with him. Their walks had become ritual. Sometimes they talked. Sometimes they simply existed in companionable silence. Tonight, Joe seemed restless. I'm taking a group camping next week, he said. Up in the Black Hills. Sacred land. The kids need it, to reconnect with traditional ways. I'd like you to come. Sarah's immediate reaction was panic. Camping. Tents. Sleeping in the wilderness with a group. But she'd learned to pause before letting fear decide for her. Will there be other women? 3 other chaperones. You'd share a tent with Maya. And Sarah, he stopped walking. You'd be completely safe. I promise you that. She believed him. Over 6 months, Joe had never given her reason not to. Okay. I'll come. The Black Hills rose like a promise, pine-covered and ancient. The group set up camp near a stream, and for 3 days they lived like their ancestors. Fished. Told stories. Sat in circles under stars that seemed close enough to touch. The teenagers softened here, became younger, less guarded. On the second night, Joe taught them about warrior tradition. Warriors aren't just fighters, he explained. They're protectors. Protectors of the people, of the land, of truth. The greatest warriors are the ones who've been wounded and chose to heal instead of becoming bitter. He looked at Sarah when he said this. She held his gaze. Later, unable to sleep, Sarah walked to the stream. The moon was full, turning the water silver. She sat on a flat rock and listened to the current. When footsteps approached, she didn't flinch. Joe sat beside her, close but not touching. Can't sleep either? Too much peace. I'm not used to it. He smiled. I understand that. They sat in silence. Sarah studied his profile in the moonlight. This man who taught her what safety felt like. What strength actually meant. What it was to be seen and valued for exactly who you were. Joe, she said quietly. I need to tell you something. I'm listening. When I first came here, I was so broken. I couldn't imagine ever feeling whole again. Couldn't imagine trusting anyone, especially a man. Especially someone strong. She paused, gathering courage. But you never tried to fix me. You just showed me I wasn't actually broken. Just changed. You did the work, Joe said. I just witnessed it. You did more than witness. She turned to face him. You believed in me when I didn't believe in myself. You gave me space but never let me disappear. You saw me as a warrior when I felt like a victim. Because that's what you are. Sarah's eyes filled with tears. I think I'm falling in love with you. Joe went very still. For a long moment, he didn't speak. Sarah's heart hammered. She'd ruined it. Misread everything. Projected feelings that weren't. I've loved you since the day you walked into the community center, Joe said softly. Terrified and trying so hard to be brave. I looked at you and thought, there's a warrior who doesn't know her own strength yet. Then why didn't you? Because you needed to heal. Because you needed to choose yourself first. Because love isn't a rescue. It's a partnership between whole people. He finally turned to face her. Are you whole yet? Sarah considered this. Was she? She still had nightmares. Still flinched sometimes. Still carried scars that would never fully fade. But she also had her center back. Her strength. Her voice. I'm whole enough, she said. Then may I touch you? Such a simple question. Such profound respect. Sarah nodded. Joe reached out slowly, giving her time to pull away. His hand cupped her face with impossible gentleness. His thumb brushed away a tear. Sarah leaned into the touch, this good man's hand that had never been raised in anger. That had pointed toward horizons and held frightened teenagers and worked tirelessly for his community. I'm scared, she whispered. Of me? Of being this happy. Of it being taken away. Nothing's guaranteed, Joe said. I lost the first woman I loved. You survived a man who should have protected you. We both know how badly things can go wrong. He leaned his forehead against hers. But we also know how precious it is when things go right. Sarah closed the distance between them and kissed him. It was soft, tentative, nothing like the demanding kisses Michael had taken. This was an offering, not a claiming. When they pulled apart, both were smiling. I'm not the woman I was before, Sarah said. I'm harder now. More scarred. Good. I don't want who you were before. I want who you are now. Who you're becoming. They sat by the stream until dawn, talking about futures they wanted to build. Joe wanted to expand the cultural center, create more programs. Sarah wanted to establish an art therapy program for trauma survivors. They wanted to do this work together, building something larger than themselves. As the sun rose over the Black Hills, painting the sky in shades of gold and pink, Sarah felt something settle in her chest. Not the absence of pain, but the presence of joy despite it. She'd been broken by a brutal marriage. But she hadn't stayed broken. She'd been put back together by her own fierce will, by Maya's friendship, by an entire community that had welcomed her, and by a Lakota chief who understood that the strongest love honors rather than controls. She wasn't the woman who'd fled Ohio with a single suitcase. She was someone new. Someone stronger. Someone who'd walked through fire and emerged tempered, not destroyed. A warrior who'd found her way back to her center and built a life worth living around it. Michael had tried to break her. But Joe standing bare had taught her the truth, she was never broken at all. Just becoming.